part 14, the Tower of Babel, we see that the whole world is gathered together in the plains of Shinar under the leadership of one guy, Nimrod, whose name means we shall rebel. Like, what's going on in the parents' head when they name a child and say, you know what, we shall rebel, he's the guy. Let's name him that. And they're building this tall structure. Now, if you look at my earlier material, I used to say, well, if their goal is to reach into heaven, it's kind of stupid. Why are you building it in the plains of Shinar? Why don't you get a head start and start building on a mountain or something? So I said, well, they must have been, the top of the Tower of Babel must have been a stargate. Yeah, that's it. It was a stargate. And they were creating an interdimensional portal to go into heaven. And I was really dogmatic about that back then. Yep. I was wrong. Whatever was happening there, it's very interesting when you look there, and God's looking down, it sees what they're doing. They're trying to build this tower to reach into heaven. He says, now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. That's pretty huge. That's a pretty huge statement right there. And then he goes down and confounds their language. Well, as I started doing research related to the topic that I discussed last night, I began to realize it actually was about height after all. I used to say it was not about height, because I was into the Stargate thing, right? And then I started to realize, wait a minute, as I started looking at some of the stuff, even that I published, my own materials that I had published and read right over, skimmed right over it, that it actually tells you, like in the book of Jubilees, and they built it 43 years they were building this thing, a 43-year project. And its breadth was 203 bricks, and its height of a brick was the third of one. Its height amounted to 5,433 cubits and 2 palms. And the extent of one wall was 13 stades, and of the other 30 stades. That's big. Note, 5,433 cubits is 8,150 feet. I found in this book right here, Bible History of Old Testament, chapter 8, Alfred Edersheim, he said, of the magnificence of Babel, the capital of the empire of Nimrod, the mighty hunter, it is difficult to convey an adequate conception without entering into details foreign to our purpose, but some idea of it may be formed from its extent, which according to the lowest computation covered no less than 100 square miles, while the highest computation would make it over 200 square miles, the base of this building. So why did they have to find it? Why did they do it in the plains of Shinar? They needed a place big enough for a 200 square mile base. That's a big building. That's why they did it in the plains of Shinar. What were they planning to do? The book of Joshua goes into tremendous detail. I'm not going to read all this just for the sake of time. But, basically, in the highlighted part there, it says, they imagined in their hearts to war against him and to ascend into heaven. Their plan wasn't just to reach into heaven. Hey, how you doing? They were going to go up there and take over. And they had divided themselves up into 3 camps. One camp was going to go in there and assault the angels. One's going to go in there, assault the throne room. And the other is going to go in there and take the throne and set Nimrod up as basically the king of everything. Their goal was to wipe out heaven and set up Nimrod as the king of the universe. Like, that was their goal. And this project took 43 years to build, and it would take people lots of time to get up the thing, carry all the stones up there. And they got to the point where, as the higher it got, if somebody fell off, nobody cared. But if they dropped a brick, everybody would mourn because all the work that went into trying to get that brick all the way up. That's how bad it got. And it continues right here. This is where it talks about them dividing into the camps, what they want to do there. And so, in my first talk that I ever did publicly, Mythology and Coming Great Deception, I talked about how, this guy was the king of the world at the time. The New World Order, there's nothing new about it. Nimrod tried to create a one world order without God. In fact, his goal was to kill God, according to these texts. And God looked down and, he makes this statement, now whatever they imagine to do won't be restrained from them. I don't believe it was ever possible for them to kill God, but for them to possibly reach into heaven, well, God made the statement, what they're trying to do won't be restrained from them. So he confounds their language. And then everybody went away, and many scholars believe, and I agree, that there were 70 different languages, 70 different people groups went away from the Tower of Babel. And there were several 100,000 people, I forget the exact number, alive at the time, and those people groups went away speaking 70 different languages and 70 different people groups, all going away talking about the same guy, but now in different languages. And that's why many different myths, there's a lot of synchronicity in these characters. And so I came to believe that these may be some of the names that in various ancient cultures may trace back to Nimrod based on characteristics described about these characters. So we'll move to part 15. Nimrod versus Abraham and a cosmic chess match. part 15. Nimrod versus Abraham and a cosmic chess match. How many of you know L.A. Marzulli? You guys know L.A.? He wrote a book a while back called The Cosmic Chess Match, and I thought, what a brilliant analogy. You know, like it's like God makes a move and the devil makes a move. There's this constant move and counter move. And to me, it's most played out in the lives of Nimrod and Abraham. Now, we get a little bit of it in Genesis. You get a lot of it. You get like 200 pages worth in Joshua talking about this. Again, is it scripture? I'm not going to get into that argument. Suffice it to say, whoever ancient Jews that wrote the book of Joshua did so with a certain mindset a long time ago. Dr. Ken Johnson traces the version of Joshua that I published. He traces that one all the way back to the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, and where it went from there into Spain and so forth. So it at least shows, as we can look at it as Jewish commentary, how they understood the narrative, perhaps through oral tradition or what have you. So I tried to take that narrative and again depict it visually. This is the timeline chart that I created as a result of that, the Nimrod-Abraham timeline chart. Why Abraham? Why did God choose Abraham in the first place? Nimrod was in the land of Shinar, and he had essentially been made king of the world in 1948 AM, or year since creation. Interesting year. This was the same year when Abraham, or Abram at the time, was born. In fact, Nimrod's evil kingship was a big part of the reason why Yahuwah called Abram out of Ur of the Chaldees, just south of Babylon, in the first place. We read in Genesis chapter 11, "And Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran his son's son, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and they went forth with them from Ur of the Chaldees to go into the land of Canaan, and they came unto Haran and dwelt there." Why did they go to Haran? Well, the patron god of Ur, where they were called out of Ur of the Chaldees, was called Sin. Interesting. From our English perspective anyway. Sin was a god of the moon in Mesopotamian mythology and of Akkad, Assyria, and Babylonia. Nana is a Sumerian deity, the son of Enlil and Ninlo, and became identified with Semitic Sin. The two chief seats of Nana/Sin's worship were Ur in the south of Mesopotamia and Haran in the north. Well, we learn throughout Scripture that Terah was an idol maker. Abram's father made idols. Abram's father was an idol worshiper and one of the chief princes of Nimrod. Joshua talks about that they served other gods, Joshua 24:2. And we see in Joshua 9, 7, and 8, they elaborate on this. Now, this is an interesting story. How many of you have read the story of Abraham in his father's house with the idols? Most of you have not, it looks like. A few people have, so I'll summarize it. But, Abram, I could appreciate him. In the Joshua account, it shows that, Nimrod, he has a dream, and his interpreters basically say that Terah, the interpretation of the dream is that Terah's son is going to kill him. So he wants to go kill Abram. And so Abram ends up being taken off, and they hide him, and he ends up spending time with Shem and Noah for quite a while. And during the time that he's with Shem and Noah, the Tower of Babel situation takes place. Later, he goes back, and there's some confrontation, different things right there. Anyway, apparently, in the time that Abram had spent with Noah and Shem, he starts to realize who the one true God is, and he sees what his dad's doing with all these idols, and he's making these idols of wood and stone and whatnot. And so he starts, questioning things. So he lays out food in front of the idols to see if they eat it. And of course, they don't eat it. So, he gets frustrated to the point where he's like, you know what, this is all a fraud. So he takes a hatchet or axe of some sort, and he starts smashing all of the idols and makes a big commotion. And then he puts the axe in the hands of the biggest idol, and his dad comes in after hearing the commotion and is like, what did you do? What have you done? He's all mad. He's like, I didn't do nothing. He did. And there's the idol holding the axe, right? And Terah's like, what are you talking about? It's made of wood and stone. And, and Abram's like, yeah, hello, McFly. Why are you worshiping this thing then? That's my elaboration. He didn't say McFly. But, he's like, why are you worshiping these things? They can't eat. They're dumb. They're stupid. You yourself just said you made it, so why are you worshiping it, So basically when, Abram's call is to go to Canaan, but he ends up going to Haran because Dad just picked up his idol shop from Ur to the next place where his idols would be sold. And then you see later that finally God says, okay, Abram, in case you're missing it, chapter 12, now Yahuwah had said to Abram, get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house unto the land I will show thee. And I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, Abram, and curse them that curse thee, Abram, and in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. So Abram departed as Yahuwah had spoken unto him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran. And Abram took Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their substance that they had gathered, and the souls that they had gotten in Haran, and they went forth to go into the land of Canaan, and into the land of Canaan they came. Where did they go? Abram passed through the land of Canaan unto the place of Shechem. And I always wondered, why Shechem? Now, of course, he could have stopped anywhere, but that name just stuck out to me. I'm like, why did he stop there? And as we kept going through Torah portions that year, Shechem kept coming up, and it became sort of an obsession for me to figure out what is the deal with Shechem. And I came to the conclusion that Abraham was going back to the Garden of Eden.